That's not a comic book. Now that's a comic book.
Black Panther, Civil War. Okay, so full disclosure. Ooh, I really like this image on the back. That's cool. I like that. Is that one of the covers and I just like totally didn't even notice it? I'm having a hard time telling because I can't seem to find a damn cover. Black Panther Namor. I want to see if I can find the full image before I start talking about this because I really, really like that visual. Just Black Panther Civil War. That's it. They just put it this little half thing. Okay. First note. I like that it's brown. That like by all standards on a comic book that should never happen, but because it's a Black Panther book about African king, it being brown is great. Okay. So everyone in the comments right now is like, Civil War. Oh crap, Civil War, Civil War, Civil War, fuck Civil War. Yeah, there we go. No Nathan Snyder, hashtag fuck Civil War. I get it. I get that the comic community hates Civil War. I understand. Here's the thing. Because I just collectively know that Civil War is awful, I have never actually read Civil War. And from what I can tell, like anything Civil War until now, from what I can tell, that was a pretty good decision. So I get it. Civil War is bad. But you know what? This was a pretty solid book. For as far as like comic book tie-ins go and how they usually interrupt and derail a whole run a lot of the time, this is a pretty solid story. Apparently the comics around Civil War were a lot better than the Civil War comic, which is not very hard to pull off. And yeah, I would tend to believe that because this isn't like the best thing that Hudlin's done, but it's got all the elements of his run built into it really well. So Black Panther and Storm have just gotten, it starts off with the story arc World Tour. Black Panther and Storm have just gotten married, and their honeymoon is wrapping up. So they decide that now they need to go on a tour of the world and meet leaders from various countries around the world. So their first stop is Latveria to go discuss something with Victor Von Doom, since he extended the opportunity that maybe they could ally with the coming American Civil War between superheroes. It, of course, does not work out very well. And Victor Von Doom wants to fight, just like almost right away. Let me see if I can find that line. Is the previous page? Here we go. T'Challa is confronting Victor Von Doom about his European superiority complex and idea. It's like, how did you tell that I was talking to you through a decoy? And T'Challa says, no sweat, no human musk. Typical of me. Too perfect. That's one way of putting it. I've always said the African is a superior physical specimen. Finish the sentence, Doom, which compensates for his lack of intellect. Generally true, yes, but clearly the Wakandan is exceptional. Perhaps a low-grade mutant strain in your people's DNA. Or perhaps because we had military might to maintain our cultural integrity and our technological superiority over Europeans such as yourselves. When you were in caves, we were charting the stars. That's a really solid line. Like there's the character implications between T'Challa, Storm, and Victor Von Doom. There's a lot going on there, but there's also just the political and scientific racism inherent to a lot of European cultures, Western cultures, in their view of Africa. It's odd, but people say, "Oh, Inglorious Bastards is such a historically inaccurate movie," and blah 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 blah. Yeah, sure. No one broke into a theater and shot Hitler in the face a bunch of times. Who knew? I always thought that's how the war ended. No, I mean certainly, Inglorious Bastards does not, on any level, attempt to accurately portray the reality of what missions were like in World War II. But it does things that a lot of other movies don't, which is show the scientific reasoning behind Nazi racism. There's this great scene in a cafe where they're talking about Jesse Owens winning gold at the Berlin Olympics. It's always been one of my favorite moments in history that the Nazis touted up how they were the physically superior race and blah 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 blah, and there were like classifications of race and which ones are the best, and the Aryan was the pinnacle. And then Jesse Owens comes in, fuck your shit. That was always really great. But in the movie, they talk about that and they go, "Oh, well, it's because the Americans, bred them as slaves, and so the success of the entirety of the American Empire can be measured by the Negro brow, whereas we Germans are still superior because we did it ourselves. And once we start breeding with the intention of creating even better Germans, then the Africans would never even begin to stand the whisper of a chance. The African that was bred for physical superiority was just barely able to outrace our genetically superior Aryans." It was like this that's like a long version of it. Tarantino writes it a lot more succinctly, but that's all that's like contained in that thought. That is scientific racism, and it's disgusting, and it's why you can't really argue with these things, because even though they're blatantly wrong, there's always a justification, there's always a thought process behind it that defies logical reasoning. There is no arguing with fascism, there is no arguing with racism. It is just a viewpoint which is immediately self-justified before it cares about being logical. And so that's just in that short little exchange between T'Challa and Doom, you just get this great level of political commentary. And I love this other moment. And this is like my main complaint with Hudlin's run so far has been that the way women are written here is pretty base, and they're often written as, like, when they're written well, they're usually written as an extension of a man. And this is where I'm starting to see that turn around, particularly with the way Storm is written. And when they take Wakanda from you, T'Challa and Doom are talking about what Wakanda will do in the oncoming civil war. And he goes, "And when they take Wakanda from you," and Storm just butts in and she says, "Violating our principles would mean we've already lost. You just don't have any to lose." And Doom says, "Put your woman in her place, T'Challa. I'd hate to have to do it for you." T'Challa says, "You should be careful how you speak to my wife. Our visit here is finished." "I don't think so." Then a bunch of Doombots rush in, and we get typical comic bookiness where all this subtlety goes out the window and we just result to fist fights, which is something I always love to death. So T'Challa and Doom fight, and there's like this whole Wakandan plan and a lot of this, one-upsmanship and neat stuff. Storm helps save him and gets him out of there and all this stuff, and they basically, fly out a lot, very with the middle fingers and out the window in the air, like "fuck you, Doom, we're better than you." And yeah, they're off. And then the next issue starts off where apparently, and I didn't know this, for a while the Inhumans had a moon base, as you do. I hear they got good real estate there, good schools too, up on the moon. No, but apparently the Inhumans fled to the moon because of all the hostility they were facing on Earth. And I really like the way this issue opens up, where I'm going to see if I can cover panels enough to do this. All right, yeah. So you get like little puff on the distant horizon. It says the moon, and you see the Earth in the background here. And we get a little more as we see this guy with a jetpack getting closer to us. And then he lands, and it's T'Challa in Black Panther astronaut gear. And that's fucking awesome. But yeah, so their next stop is go to the moon and visit with the Inhumans. But the Inhumans are understandably a very scared culture. They're wary. They're suspicious. Also, I really like how T'Challa gets to the moon. Hold on. Does Storm say anything? I'm never leaving your side, but I hate space travel. The lack of atmosphere on the confines of the ships. Speaking of which, there's a Wakandan space program. So anyways, they take off, or they're about to take off, and I just love the way that the Wakandan space program functions. How are you doing, Aurora? Fine, just fine. Brace for takeoff. Don't worry, we're not strapped to a skyscraper of liquid dynamite like most conventional spaceships. We use the Earth's magnetic waves to slingshot us into space. What does that mean? Whoa! And then they have a Black Panther-shaped spaceship that just flies off the ground. No rockets, no nothing. That's neat. That's just cool. Anyways, they get to the moon, and they're talking with the Inhumans about where they'll stand on the coming civil war and what it's going to mean for them, and whether or not they should just, and the Inhumans ask T'Challa, since he's the only human they can trust, they ask T'Challa, do you think we should just declare war on humanity at this point? And T'Challa's like, no? Am I your prisoner? Is that why I'm here? And they're like, no, of course not. We respect you, blah, blah. But the second Black Bolt leaves the room, the other Inhumans start to attack him, and they're just clearly mistrustful. So he knows he can't be around them. And it's just like a good example of how tensions are boiling to the point where T'Challa can't even be near friends. And so he, punching, they have to escape. Crazy situation. Crazy situation weirdness. Okay. Next issue is they go to visit Namor at Atlantis. This chapter is called Aqua Boogie. Why not? And Namor is just trying to convince T'Challa that he should be the one leading the effort against U.S. imperialism through the Superhero Registration Act, because what it seems to the rest of the world, including these hidden kingdoms, to be is an attempt to conscript an army of superheroes and to start superhero wars. And T'Challa needs to be the voice of the world standing up against that, because Namor can't be, because he's seen as too rash by the rest of the world. And I don't know, I really like that. And that argument is kind of what convinces T'Challa that, yeah, I can't stand for that level of overreach and overpower. And so Black Panther decides that he will lead the force and try to end the Civil War, and that's why he is on Captain America's side when it comes to the Superhero Registration Act. Now he tries, as his final visit, he tries to visit the president at the White House, but when they show up to visit, Storm is asked to sign registration forms since she's also an American. And that's just really cool. Like, it's this really dick move that Tony Stark orchestrated, and T'Challa just immediately sees it as an insult and decides to leave. Now, what's happening at the beginning of this, though, is you have protesters and fans of T'Challa lining up in front of the White House to support his visit. And I love that we get basically Fox News and local news depicting what's happening here. I really like this. I'm going to just read both these anchors. A group of angry protesters have gathered around the White House today. An enthusiastic crowd has gathered in front of the White House to greet the royal couple of King T'Challa and Queen Aurora. The Fox anchor goes to interview a police officer. In the interest of public safety, we are urging people to stay at home. Member of the crowd, come on, we had to be here. This is way better than Charles and Diana. The question is, will the arrival of the wealthy African king and his mutant wife calm the crowd or incite it? I haven't been in a crowd this hyped since Michael Jackson's victory tour in '84, and the question on everyone's lips is, where the after party at? That's just like really interesting, I guess. I don't know, like it's a pretty good commentary on the way in which media depicts crowds. Red saying, I'm acting like Tony's side was the only one that was evil in this. Tony was tyrannical and Cap was a terrorist. They were all insane. I haven't read Civil War. I can't tell you how I feel. All I'm reading is what is going on for Black Panther in this book. And so this does a really good job of showing you why Black Panther is joining the side he is joining, not because of just the idea of individual liberty and stuff, but because the fact that this could mean the beginning of a super-powered war in the world, and that's not something that he wants to sit by and watch happen. So violence does erupt on the lawn of the White House when T'Challa sees police start to rush the crowd and a child gets separated from her father. So he jumps the White House fence and goes to save the kid. And Tony's been having, fucking sentinels waiting to take him down. And the sentinels go after him and Storm, and the bodyguards destroy the sentinels. Of course, James Rhodes is in one of the sentinels, and T'Challa is able to protect him and get him out. And that's kind of this, big surprising thing. They fight Iron Man briefly. T'Challa cuts him with the ebony blade, which is pretty neat. Yeah. And Rhodey convinces Tony to let T'Challa walk away without more of a fight because he just saved his fucking life from the danger that Tony put him in. I like that. Then we have the death of Goliath that happens in this. And this is where we get an art shift. I'm not a huge fan of this art shift. It's definitely got a more realistic style, but I feel like it's trying to harken back to kind of the Harlem Renaissance style of art. And something about that just doesn't look great in a comic book. it's a little too loose, too free-formy, and it just looks like the pages kind of melted as opposed to the jazz era kind of how to put this, because I know I've seen murals and stuff that have kind of a similar art style, kind of a jazz era, kind of loose and free-forming, flowing art style. And something about that doesn't quite work in a superhero comic where there's supposed to be a sense of power and scale and, you know, dominance and imposing in the panels. This just doesn't quite capture that. It loses too much of that emotion to bend to this kind of art style. Who's doing the art for this issue? This issue number 23. Let's see here. Collecting Black Panther 1925. Illustrated by Scot, Eaton, Manuel, Garcia, and Turnbull. I'm going to assume this is Manuel Garcia. War Crimes, Turnbull, and Marcus 2. I don't know, just it doesn't flow. It doesn't work really well here. It's too loose and it loses, you know, a sense of dynamic imagery in a comic that you need. Interesting uses of perspective though. Like I like this shot of the jet. That's really cool. I really like the coloring. I think the colorist did a great job here, but I just don't really care for the pencil work. That maybe the art's a little too big in this because there's like this moment where T'Challa's supposed to be jumping and landing somewhere, but like we don't see the start of the jump because they wanted to put so much focus on the size of T'Challa on the panel. And I just don't like that. But anyway, this is like dealing with the fallout of the Civil War after Thor killed Goliath because that happened. Maybe Thor is just a really bad person in the comics, period. End of story. And so T'Challa's being visited by some of his Wakandan advisors, and they tell him that he's losing the faith of the people because he's spending so much time in America dealing with this American issue. And we're getting a bunch of political commentary, and the U.S. is really suspicious of what T'Challa's doing here and what's going on, what's happening. T'Challa meets up with Cap, and they spar to prove that it's actually him. And something with Thor. Iron Man tries to visit the consulate and gets his ass handed to him. Cap and T'Challa decide to work together. A lot of this part that's all, more or less all Civil War, as T'Challa is their strategist and plans how they're gonna break people out of the what's the name of the dimension that the Fantastic Four discovered? It's gonna drive me nuts. It's gonna drive me up the friggin' wall. I don't know. Apparently, Reed Richards and Tony Stark were using an alternate dimension to house Negative Zone. Thank you, to house criminals, and like that's pretty fucked up. So that's another straw as to why T'Challa decided to do this. But yeah, they deal with all this crap. The fight starts. There's a plan. Storm tries to talk some sense into Reed Richards, but he's got his head literally bent around his back, spiraled down, and shoved straight up his ass, so he's not hearing any of it. The Wakandan embassy gets attacked after this raid to bust prisoners out of the negative zone. Thor and Storm fight, which is kind of cool. And after she kind of takes him down a couple pegs, Hercules shows up to finish the job. And I really, really like this moment between Sue Storm and Storm as they watch Hercules fighting Thor. Because I love it. Thor's down, and Hercules like shows up and is like, I'll take care of the rest of this. And then we just cut to Sue Storm and Storm hanging out, talking, watching this fight. And this is where, yeah, the role of women is starting to be written better. I guess it takes for them to be married for that to work for Hudlin. I don't know. It's undeniably a problem with his early volumes, the way in which he characterizes women and kind of makes them in different ways subservient to men or reliant on the position of men to have a position of their own. But this moment of just them talking and reacting to Hercules fighting Thor is really genuinely fun, and it makes them feel like actual people. Storm is written great throughout this book, though, I will say. I really like her here. Yeah, otherwise, just been a solid book. Otherwise, I don't know. I don't have a ton to say about it. I can tell why people don't like Civil War. I'm getting all these comments explaining why it's really bad. Yeah, you're probably right. It is really bad. It's a comic crossover. How many of them are actually good? Ian, this book is great. Comments, fuck Civil War. Thank you, Shadow of Batman. That's pretty much it. And yeah, I'm sure the crossover is awful, but this book is able to like run with the premise of what's happening in the Marvel universe at the time and make it work for the character, where Black Panther is trying to figure out how he feels about all this, and it's the global geopolitical side of things that he is thinking of and why he makes his choice. And it does a really good job of arguing why that's the right choice. Anyway, solid enough. I'm still enjoying the run. I've still got a couple volumes to go.
That's not a comic book. Now that's a comic book.